Is the still camera upstairs?
Start taking their seats. I'd like to get started in about a minute if we could. If you have friends out in the hall, would you ask them to come on in and
I can do that. We weren't broadcasting live or anything.
Just save it. Send
Blow it up big.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brenda Little. I am the chair of the board of the LCCC Board of Trustees. And so on behalf of the Board of Trustees, welcome to our public forum this afternoon for us to listen to our second candidate for the day, Bob Cox, who will be here to answer some questions for us. I want to quickly run through some process notes before we get started. Wyoming law states that a community college board shall appoint a chief administrative officer of the community college. And here at LCCC, we as board members take that responsibility very solemnly and very seriously. We want to choose the best interim president for this college, for the students, faculty, and staff, and also the community. And so we need your help to do that, which is why we have invited you here both for the interviews and for the public forum discussions, because we would like to hear your comments and your feedback on our candidates. We need you to help us make the best decision. If you have a question you would like to ask Bob, would you please write down your question on a 3x5 card and hand it to Dave Gare over there. Dave is not only taking the cards, but also passing them out. So if you need one, just raise up your hand and he can also give you a card. We're doing it that way so that we can make sure that we don't ask any questions that are legally inappropriate. We as a board talked about how to make sure that happened. And so we thought, well, if everyone could write down their questions on a card, give the card to Dave. Dave had a tutoring session with our attorney Lance Harmon this morning to learn the keywords that we can't and should not ask. So it's just a way for Dave to not only take a look at the questions first, but also to keep the traffic flow going so that Dave can make sure we only take an hour, which is what we have scheduled for today. During that hour, we would like you to listen to Bob's responses to the questions and then score them on the yellow score sheet that you received. It's yellow in color, has the name of all 6 candidates. We're asking that you fill out, or you have one form for all the candidates. So that form belongs to you until you are done seeing all the candidates in public forums. If this is the only one you're watching today, then go ahead and turn it in to a board member after today. If you are attending different public forums for the other 5 candidates, please keep that form with you until you have attended the last public forum. And then please turn your scorecard into a board member. There's me, there's Carol, there's John there's Ed, Kevin is around here somewhere, there he is. So any board member can take your score sheet. You can put your name on it or not. That's all up to you. The board is collecting the score sheets and comments. By the way, you can write comments on the back of your score sheet. We are collecting the score sheets and comments from both the interviews and from this public forum. We will gather those and we will use those in analysis and input for our deliberation in the final decision making for the interim president. We will look over your scores, we will look over your comments, we will take all those things to heart, but please know that in the end, it is the Board of Trustees, the elected Board of Trustees, who needs to make the final decision as to the interim college president. We will be making a decision in that line on February 2nd. We have a regularly scheduled study session on February 2nd. After that study session, we are going to go into executive session where we will discuss the candidates. We will look at all the score sheets, comments, have deliberation on our choice, and that night either make a choice about someone to whom we want to offer the position or make the decision to start all over. So that will happen on February 2nd. anything further to say, so I'll wait till Dave. Dave, are you ready?
I am ready.
It's the Dave and Bob show.
You can read it, you can stand. You're the wander, which I do best.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Bob.
I guess I have to wait for a question, but if I may say one comment or
Absolutely, go ahead.
I was never very good with math. That's why they put me in the finance area at lovely colleges. But frankly, it's a pleasure to see you all again. For those of you that don't know me, I had been here at LCCC for 23 years, amazingly. I say amazingly because sometimes you look back and you go, holy cow, have you actually been here that long? The day I left, and I had. The thing you discover, though, when you leave a great place like this is you miss it. You miss the folks here, you miss the people here, you miss everybody, all that you work with, and you lost a little bit when you walk away from here. So I'm delighted to be back today. I am a Cheyenne kid. I grew up here. My family is from here. My grandparents are from here. My great-grandparents are from here. What I had to do is, I remember when I worked as an adjunct instructor for Regis University, one of the things they had us do at a gathering was they had everybody stand up, and I think I'll have you all do that. Can you all stand up for just a minute? And the question is who grew up in Cheyenne? And if you did not grow up in Cheyenne, sit down. How many of you had your parents grow up in Cheyenne? How many grandparents? How many great-grandparents? So the point being is that we are a mobile society. We don't necessarily know where people are from or what they are about, but I'm still standing because that's my legacy. I have my family, some of my family members are here, my mom, and my extended family, Mary Ann and Bob Merrick, and my cousin Jackie, so I thank them for attending today as well. So I just wanted to let you know I'm a Cheyenne kid. I've been here a long time. I started out at Churchill School, where my mom taught for a number of years at 4th grade, and ended up moving over to Hobbs, and then to Davis, and then to McCormick, and then to graduating from Central High, and then over to UW. So I think I have a long history of Cheyenne, Laramie County, and just kind of to let you all know that, so that I am from here, and that's who I am. Thanks. So I'm ready.
All right, your first question is, what would you do as interim president to increase the morale on campus and improve the image of LCCC in the public?
Well, I think, first of all, and I had responded to this with a question from the newspaper, and it has to do, I think, with the development and moving forward with the trust of the administration, the trust of me, trust of those of us that are working on behalf of everyone. I think what we have to recognize is that all of you, those of you that are faculty, staff, and people that, students and what have you, have taken on a lot in the last few years. And I don't mean that just because of some of the issues that have been publicly made public through the newspaper, but what I'm talking about is the numbers and the growth of this institution. It's been absolutely tremendous. You know, when you take the staff that we have, the faculty that we have, and you bring in 10 and 20% kinds of enrollment increases each year, a lot of pressure is being put on to everybody to perform, to deliver services, to deliver the classes that are desired. And so I think first of all, you need to start by recognizing that. Second of all, I think we need to look at our people being appropriately treated. You know, are we overloading people with the amount of work that's involved? What do we need to do to make corrections to that? How do we engage faculty and staff in discussions with regard to the needs that we have on this campus? So I think it's gaining that trust, but also recognizing the commitment that all of you have to this institution, and certainly that I had and have with regard to this institution.
Given that this is a temporary interim position, why are you interested in this position?
Well, that's a great question, because I've been asked that a number of times. I think I can state this the best by saying that, as I said earlier, I'm a Cheyenne kid. I've grown up here. My family was involved with the founding of this institution back in 1968. Having used the term LCCC is in my genes, I have a commitment to this institution. I would like to see or feel that I have the opportunity to help as we move forward into the next, on to the next things that are happening. I think with my experience that I bring here, I think my timing is good to help with those kinds of things. Over the years, I've worked with the legislature, the governor. I've only met Governor Meade, but with Governor Friedenthal and the legislators. So I bring that experience, that knowledge. I understand the community college process in this state. I've worked with the other college presidents in this state. So I think I'm in a position to be able to provide that leadership and assistance as we move forward into the next few years. I will say I'm interested in this beyond the interim. I'll let you all know that. So my goal is not just to do this as an interim, but to also take the next step and apply to be, if you will, the next full-time president of the college.
What approach will you take to interact and be involved with the student body?
That certainly involves meeting with the student body, listening to the student body, meeting with ASG. I think I also need to be aware of a variety of things, and I am aware of a variety of things. You know, obviously students are concerned about what the costs are to go to school. They're also concerned about, as I understand, the fees that have been assessed lately with regard to a variety of things. I think my role would be to meet with the students more frequently. There's also probably one of the biggest components that LCCC has, and I believe still has, and that's the part-time student. If anything, those are the students that are looking for financial assistance because of the fact that if you're a full-time student, you have available to you the Hathaway Scholarship, you have a number of foundation scholarships available in a variety of things, but as a part-time student, it's more difficult. You've got to find either out of your pocket or some other way to pay for going to school. And so we need to be conscious of that particular group of students. And so I intend to participate with regard to how we might proceed with that. One of the things that you may not be aware of is the Community College Commission recently had a discussion about raising tuition. Well, tuition went up $3 a credit hour, as you may be aware. Obviously, the concern was it's between a 4% and a 5% increase. Well, the discussion became, well, what should we do? We need to raise revenue through tuition increases. Well, I don't disagree with that. It's got to keep some kind of a pace to keep up with the costs of going to school. But the whole conversation became kind of focused just on the full-time rate. And what occurred to me is maybe what we need to do, and especially since they've asked the commission to do this, is to evaluate what kind of a tuition structure we ought to have. One of the things that was never brought up was the idea that maybe what we need to do is have a lower tuition credit hour rate from hours 1 through 12, and then look at how we deal with the hours above 12. And so the point being is that it's a lower rate for those students that actually need the help to get into school, and for those that have access to scholarships, the Hathaway funding, and those kinds of things, recognizing that it will be more of a cost to them, but frankly, when you've got 12 hours that you're already being paid for, it's already discounted, and then you look at the costs above that, students aren't paying that, but for every hour up to 12, somebody's paying for that. And so I think that's one of the ways to look at it, to help students communicate that with students and find out what they feel about it.
If you are the successful candidate, what do you hope to accomplish during your interim appointment, and what would be your first priority?
Well, my first priority has to do with obviously beginning to develop the trust that I've talked about. And I see that as a series of meetings, not only with faculty, staff, but also with the community leaders, those that are the foundation directors. The foundation is a crucial piece of our puzzle now, and that type of thing. So I need to have that be part of the process. But in addition to that, what I see on the agenda as being particularly important is the fact that we're staring right at the development of our next biennial budget. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be done between now and June to get that pulled together. And you say, well, what is that for? Well, it's for 2013, 2014, but we've got to have that stuff in place by the end of June. And some items, particularly as it relates to capital construction projects, building buildings, and we know we have a need there, to have that ready, most of that ready by May. So there's a lot to do in a short period of time, and that's where I see my responsibility is pulling that together, the first two things. So I see it happening simultaneously.
Academic programs of study are offered under both the Vice President of Instruction and the Vice President of Workforce and Community Development. How would you ensure academic quality and integrity, consistency, and communication across these two areas within this organizational structure?
Well, academic quality is the issue, and that's what we need to certainly be focused on, is the quality issues. As I had indicated for those of you that may have seen it earlier, one of the questions had to do with process. And I think to ensure that, you need to look at the process that we have to evaluate programs, be it academic, be it workforce, or even services that we provide. So much of it hinges or is revolved around the idea that we need to look at what's happening with enrollments. We look at the enrollments in the program. Are students taking these classes? Are people using our services? If they're not, that in itself puts up a red flag. It says, well, we need to look at that and see what's happening. The second thing is you look at the cost to run the program. Is it costing us a lot of money to run the program? And if it is there ultimately a benefit? That is, are the students actually going out into jobs? If it's a workforce program, are they academically prepared? What is the information we're receiving back from the university, for example, with regard to the preparedness of our students? And so I think those are all elements in that. With regard to services, I think it's the same thing. If we see a persistent complaint from students or from people that use a particular service, then we need to follow up on that and make adjustments as necessary. In some cases, it becomes a matter of, and I talked about this, we had to shut a program down at Eastern Wyoming College, and it was an academic, it was a instructional program. But on the same token, when I was here, we had a program that was a service, an auxiliary service, that had a myriad of problems happening, and ultimately, but it was heavily used and it was needed, and as a result, we put the investment into that to make it operate. We switched some things with management, reorganized it, brought in some people to help us get it back on step, and it worked well. And so I think it just depends upon the circumstance, but the quality, I think, starts with when you look at enrollment. Second of all, you start to look at then the curriculum that's being offered. Is it meeting the needs? And is there job opportunities once you get done with that? So those are three things.
What do you understand the role of the interim president to be and the expectations of the board? How will this role differ from the role of our permanent president?
Well, that's probably one of the discussion points that I brought up at the end. of our interview that we had earlier, I was curious myself, because I would think that as an interim president, that many of the things that an interim would do would be similar to what a permanent full-time president would do. I would think that we would want to be moving forth with certain things that are in our master plan, particularly, I'm not sure where we are with the facility plan, but I understand that it's in the works. And so I would think that we need to be prepared, and me being in the role of the president of the college, taking the leadership role to carry those things forward, regardless of who it is, because I think we need to communicate that to our public. We need to start planning for those kinds of things, because those are things that we want to do, regardless of who's in this role. So from that perspective, I'm not real sure what the difference is. I brought up the question because most of the questions, if you've seen the 10 questions that all 6 of us have had to respond to, they were basically process questions. Not all of them, but a good majority of them. And so that issue came up, and I understand that that's a role of a president as well, is to see that processes are working correctly, that the administrators are managing the areas that they're responsible for. But I also see the bigger picture, and that is our responsibility to see legislators, see businessmen, communicate what it is we want to be, what we need to do. As I said before, we've had huge enrollments. We've had huge enrollments in Laramie, huge enrollments here. We know, at least I knew 2 years ago, and I assume it hasn't changed much, that we've got space concerns with regard to where we put faculty. We know we need to add faculty. We know we need probably some staffing adjustments as well. So all of those things need to happen, but we also have to have a place to put it. The formula funding model does a heck of a job, sort of distributing the funds. If the legislature funds it, or if we find a source to do it. But frankly, we don't really have a good process to deal with capital facilities, that is adding space. And the only way we're going to go about being able to do that is to get the process started now and move it forward, because it takes some time to get facilities built. Case in point was how long it took us to get to Albany County campus with the facility. Similarly, the health science building that we built. It took, what, 5 years, 4 or 5 years? So any of these capital projects that we need to move forth on, they need to be started now, I believe. And we need to prep ourselves for that and be ready to move forward.
You may have heard that the Board of Trustees has ordered an organizational audit. Please provide your views, comments on implementing organizational restructuring. How would you handle the tough personnel decisions that are recommended from the audit?
This is deja vu. I see Bruce sitting in the back row, and he and I will remember that was one of the processes that we put into place prior to what we did in 1999-2000, and that was the implementation of a RIF. The RIF is never fun. It's never thrilling, but we use the organizational audit as a means to assess that, to assess, not necessarily to do the RIF per se, but to assess where we have people, where we need help in certain areas. The outcome of that, quite frankly, was that as those of you that were here, and was that we were short in the instructional side to our comparators being a group of, at that time it was 12 colleges we were compared with, and we were long in some of the other areas. And so ultimately it became a device that was used to assist with the evaluation of what positions needed to be ripped. And I would hope we would not have to go down that path. But I would also assume from that it would give us some opportunity to reorganize, moving folks from one spot to another. Second of all, as to how we spend any additional monies as we add faculty and staff. So I think it's a good process. It can be used adversely, maybe not adversely, but used both in a way to help reduce staff, but I think probably what we're looking at now is how we hire new staff and how we expand.
LCCC utilizes the Academic Quality Improvement Program, or AQUIP, to maintain its accreditation with the Higher Learning Commission. Discuss your familiarity with the AQUIP process.
Well, I started here as the AQUIP process was getting started, and it's always a challenge to start a new program like that. I think Marlene knows what she went through to get the process started. I know we've had a lot of folks that were very committed to it, and I don't want to suggest I'm not. I am, certainly. It means academic quality improvement, as I understand it, and our original focus was, and I'm not sure where it's led to at this point, but advising was one of the key things. Communication was a major issue, and number 3. But in any regard, I think it's a good process. The focus is on trying to improve, continuously improve how we do things on campus. It does take a lot of time from people's schedules to work on this. And that, I suspect, is the one thing that concerns me a tad, is the amount of time that's involved with it. But on the other hand, if it's become accepted, if it's liked, the outcomes are good, we're constantly improving the quality of our programs here on campus, the quality of the services that we provide, and the students are the beneficiaries, and certainly it's something that ought to be moved forward and continue. So,
how do you build trust within the institution?
Ooh, boy, that's a tough one, especially when you talk things like RIF policies and so forth. Nobody likes to do that. And that immediately puts a trust factor right in front of everybody. As I said, I don't expect, based on what's happening legislatively, that that's going to be an issue. But trust certainly is an important aspect of that. And I think so much of it revolves around your ability to go visit with the faculty, staff, attend meetings, be there, discuss points, have an open forum with regard to thought and discussion. We're a learning institution. We all learn. I learn every day. Every day it's amazing. Something different happens and you go, man, I thought I'd seen it all. But I think it's always learning. And I don't think you can put a lid on it. I think you have to have that opportunity to speak and say what's on your mind, and not be threatened, that you might lose your job over it, because it shouldn't be something that you lose your job over. I do think, though, that there are some limits, and one of them would be that something that incites violence or incites those kinds of things, that we need to be prepared or put up some kind of a discussion about that. But beyond that, I think most items are open for discussion.
What new initiatives would you propose as interim president for LCCC?
What did you say?
Initiatives.
Oh, initiatives. New initiatives. Well, there's a lot on the table. If you looked at the master plan, there is a ton of many items that need to be moved forward. I think the one thing that I have talked about is the need to deal with our enrollment impact. I think number one, it's maybe not new, but I think we need to get moving on something with Albany County campus. I know that that's a facility that's probably under a lot of stress with the numbers that it serves, and that project needs to get moving forward. I don't know where we are with the University of Wyoming. As I said earlier, I was surprised to see Dr. Buchanan turn back $400,000 in planning money for a UW-LCCC project here. Obviously, that's something that needs to be addressed with the board, but certainly would like to bring that back up, and that would be, again, it's not new, but something that I think needs to be considered and potentially move forward on. Particularly in light of the fact that Casper's getting ready to build a $32 million facility with the UWCC building, and Sheridan College is in the planning process where there's funding for planning for Sheridan College to do something similar. And I'm not sure if it's Gillette or Sheridan where they're planning to do it, but it doesn't mean sour grapes over what's going on there, but I think certainly us having the biggest population in the state in this corner, that there is a demand for higher ed offerings beyond the 2-year degree, and we can be the facilitator to work together to make that happen. So I'd say those are 2 major projects that I think need to start moving forward and get into the immediate planning stage.
What is your philosophy of how to promote a fast-growing branch campus?
Let's see, philosophy. Since it is fast-growing, certainly we need to be responsive to that. I think also, though, we need to look at the community that we're growing in and make sure and see that we have a commitment from the community, either in the form of space, in the form of financing. To use an example, Gillette College, or part of Sheridan College, infamous Gillette, they did go to the community. They did get support with local taxation to help build their tech center, to help do a variety of things there. I think we need that. On the same token, though, we also know we have a large group of people that we want to serve in Albany County, and I think we have a responsibility to take forward expansions as we need to add the facility that we need. I'm not adverse, though, frankly, to the idea that I remember at one point when I was here, Dr. Buchanan had offered up space on the university campus and the possibility, and so that might be something we work with partnerships with regard to space needs to deal with some of that, at least on the interim. But I do know that we need to be prepared to move forward, to provide for it. Philosophically, I think we need the community support in Albany County to also be there for us. And when we were there before, when we built the campus that's there right now, we did have a huge community support, which was good. And ultimately, the city stepped up with a piece of ground to provide for us to do that. And I think we've similarly got that opportunity, both potentially with the city, but also with the University of Wyoming. So we need that.
Wyoming Community College presidents sit on the executive council of the Wyoming Community College Commission. How would you balance advocating for the needs of LCCC with supporting the interests of the statewide community college system?
Well, I've spent my career largely battling the funding battle, and certainly understand it and understand the differences between each of the institutions. There is an element of trading off with one another, sharing with one another, and compromising on certain elements of it. We've been through a variety of formula funding models. One, the original model was an FTE-driven model, and then we shifted from the full FTE being full-time equivalent student model, which was based on students and student enrollment. It shifted from that to a comparator model, which was, well, we were struggling with funding. It wasn't being funded legislatively, and so we were in a position where we needed to make a point about how we compared to colleges like ourselves. So we went through the comparator model for several years, and that worked to generate some funding for us. It also helped a little with the state's economy shooting up as it did. And now all of a sudden we've shifted back, I shouldn't say all of a sudden, but we've shifted back to an FTE model. So I think it's been a series of compromises. It's been a series of working and recognizing the differences between the 7 colleges, and for that matter, the similarities. And so I think I've had quite a bit of experience working with that, and a lot of experience with making that work. The current formula funding model, while it's not perfect, it's probably better than most. Roughly 60% of the funding that we receive through it is what's referred to as a fixed cost, and that frankly helped the the smaller colleges, and in an odd sort of a way, it also helped Western Wyoming College, which happens to be one of the wealthiest districts in the state. But at the same token, the other 40% of the funding that we receive is based on $1 per student. And so I think the net effect of that is it became a good balancing and a good compromise. One of the problems with the variable cost is that it's not continuing, which means that each time you go back to the legislature, you have to put it in as an exception budget request. And I think that part of it needs to be fixed. There's a couple other things that need to be fixed, but I think we've done a good job of recognizing how to compromise. We have to compromise and work toward the common goal, which is providing good opportunities for our students in the state.
Over the past 5 years, enrollment in LCCC has grown by 15%. In several areas, including instruction, the number of employees has not kept pace. What strategies would you use to address this issue?
Yeah, I know it hasn't kept pace. It's a problem, and basically the strategies would have to do with what I think is evidently being implemented, and that's the evaluation of that process that's going on. I think also as we have new funds, we've got to deal with the faculty side of the equation. But beyond that, we've also got to get moving forward on a facility plan, and because it's going to take a while for all of that to come together.
Give us an example of a time when you led a group of campus organizations with diverse opinions, but with the same goal. How did you bring them together, and what was the result?
Challenges. Well, when we talk about diverse opinions, I don't know that I have a great example here. I'd have to think about diverse opinions. Most of my work has been involved, obviously, with the fiscal side of the house, and we run into issues with regard to funding and how the funding ought to be distributed, and what's in the best interest of the college and the best interest of what's happening. I do think, though, if we have diversity associated or diverse opinions with regard to, I understand several years ago there was some concern about the cost of and the impact to students with regard to the cafeteria renovation. It lent itself to a great deal of discussion and angst and anguish, and I have to say it was certainly something that I knew after being here that it needed to be done, but I think the timing wasn't exactly the best with regard to that. And there might have been another alternative that could have been considered at the time. Not being here, I don't know exactly all of the details behind it, but I think there's ways to work through problems like that and to discuss them and not try to force something through before it's time.
How do you view the role of educational services staff, non-administrators and non-faculty in the decision-making process?
Well, very important with regard to decision processing, because many of the educational services staff are what we say on the front line. They see the customers, they see the students, they see the issues that are before them, and so we need to hear and be responsive to that, because ultimately it's the students that are here wanting to get their education to learn, and if they're not happy, we need to know what those concerns are, and be responsive to that. Furthermore, there's other issues. Obviously we've got a big responsibility. We've got 700,000 square feet of facility here. We need to hear from the folks that work in that area. What are the problems with the area? As was noted, we were in the other room, and there was a fan over there that was going clink, 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 and is that about to drive you crazy? And I go, yeah. But actually, I wasn't noticing it so much, but others were. And so we've got to be aware of that responsibility to the physical operation. And where do you hear that from? But from the plant operations folks. Similarly with some of the educational areas with what's happening with the students coming in here for workforce services, for example, and or the services provided there. If there's a convenience issue or customer service issue, we certainly need to know about that and be responsive to that as well. So what comes from the educational services staff is extremely important to understand problems that are before us with regard to those issues.
What about your experience, knowledge, and skills make you the best candidate for this position?
Well, I think my years of experience go back to 1977 when I started at the State Budget Office writing Governor Herschler's budget recommendations. And so I'm starting there, and then having worked at the University of Wyoming for 2.5 years as the budget director there, that certainly gives you a whole different insight into what is big, of course, then. And they're bigger now. And then my movement over here into the community college system of 25 years, I guess, between here and my work up at Eastern Wyoming College. You know, I know how to work. I've worked with college presidents. I've worked with the Community College Commission. I've worked with the VPs of each of the colleges. So I think I bring a lot of knowledge and understand the processes that are involved, and so I think timing-wise, I think I would be a good fit.
How will you organize a $60 million budget?
Well, let me tell you. A little bit here, a little bit there. I gotta get a drink of water. This might take a while. You know, I got to say, it's sometimes I wonder if it isn't easier to go someplace where they don't know you. In any regard, the $60 million budget. Well, I know mostly what the components are. I see Jane hiding in the back row there. She could probably get me squared up in a hurry, but I do know that the biggest piece of the budget, unless we've got a big capital facility piece in there, which I don't know that we do, but most of the budget is the operational budget, and it's divided into its respective components. But the bottom line is I think, and I don't know, but roughly 70% of the budget is salaries and benefits. Okay. The next piece of the budget is going to be plant operations and utilities, and that's going to be roughly 10 to 15% of the budget. So you've got 85% of the budget tied up into those two components, running facilities and also paying for salaries and benefits. So from there, what we have left is about, well, 10–15% that's left for things like travel, supplies, equipment, and everything else. So how would I change that? Well, that part doesn't really change a whole lot. What you look for are opportunities to keep, frankly, the best spot to be is if you can keep salaries and benefits within roughly 70% of the budget. That gives you room on the end to have funds to plan and to do other kinds of things besides just survive. So I think that's one of the elements. The other thing with regard to that now, as far as to the distribution of funds, that's a different thing. And it all depends upon what kind of institution we are. We've traditionally been one, and started that way, as split between academic, vocational, technical, and workforce has become a major element of this campus as well. As I was looking at the site, the website, I noticed that I was surprised, quite frankly, that the workforce component of this is about 4,300 students, as I recall. The FTE on campus is about the same, full-time equivalent. Head count is about 6,000. So we have a wide array of possibilities of how to allocate funds. I think we've tried to focus those dollars on the areas that where we have the most impact and assist the community the best. And an example would be the health science, for example. The evolution of the health science building came about because of community demand, because of legislative demand, and ultimately we responded to that, which included faculty, staff, new facility, a great facility really, if you look around. And so I think that was wise. I think those are good ways to go about it, to look at it from that perspective. I also think, though, that as we look at our budget, we've got to be careful that we don't lose sight of, and I talked about this earlier, the fingers of all of the other kinds of programming that we offer. We've got to be focused on the core, math, English, science, those requirements, because we are technically a two-year school, and those kinds of things are required any place you go. So if anything, that's obviously, I believe, where funding needs to be directed in those particular areas. And so, long story short, I think that's generally how we do it. The rest of the budget is usually made up of grants and some monies that are specifically allocated for specific purposes. But the lion's share of the budget, which I assume is close to $35 million, is the operational budget.
What is your main goal to keep students happy and satisfied on campus?
That's my main goal. Is that the question? Or
What one thing would you do?
What
do you think is most important to keep students happy?
Engaged, I think. Engaged in their classes, engaged in community service, engaged in what's happening in their lives and with regard to those issues. I think students get the most benefit when they're involved with their school, they're involved with their classes, involved with their friends, that we are a place that allows for that, and it encourages them to come and be here and participate and make those opportunities available. I know that's been one of the things that has been high on our list of things to do in the last, last 10 years. That being focused on image of the college, so that we aren't a dull, boring place and all you do is come out, take a class, and go home. We want students to come out and have the opportunity to meet their friends, feel good about coming here, have pride in going to school here, and enjoy and be engaged in their classes.
Why did you retire from LCCC?
I don't know.
Okay.
I gotta tell you, for those of you contemplating retirement, don't if you're not ready. I shouldn't. As I said, I'm not very good at math. I always had this silly brain of mine that I could retire, or ought to retire, because what happens to you in your life when you put in so many years of service is that the numbers come up. The numbers come up and they say, oh, you got 33 years, you got your age, and you do the math, you add it all up, and all of a sudden you hit what's called the rule of 85. And when you hit the rule of 85, all of a sudden they say to you, or you can't do it, and you go, well, shoot, I can retire, because all I'm doing is turning dollars into quarters by not going ahead and accepting that retirement. And so I always have that in my brain. I say, well, I'm going to retire as soon as I hit the rule of 85. And I know many people do. And the thing is that you realize that maybe it wasn't such a hot idea. And so I think it's an internal thing I discovered immediately. I went to work with the WACCT, which was a great and fun thing to do. Actually, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working with legislators. I enjoyed working with the presidents and the trustees at all of the colleges. But when the legislature was over, it was like, now what do I do? And while there were things that I was supposed to do and did do, it really didn't come around until July. So the fact of the matter is I didn't know how to retire, number one. Number two, as you see, I went back to work because I missed doing that. I missed what I was doing. And so back to your original question, I know why I retired, and now hindsight's always best side. Should have I done that? And the answer was, well, based on the media, maybe so. No, seriously, sometimes I wonder, and I go, whoa, I'm glad I wasn't here for that March meeting. Anyway. my reality is that had I thought about it again, or if I were to do it again, I probably would not, even though maybe everybody wanted to run me out of town at that time.
Please tell us about an original idea of yours that you were able to implement successfully.
Oh boy, several. I don't know how original they are, but certainly it was an opportunity that I seized. I've talked about this before. I don't know how many times I've said this today, maybe more so than the other meeting, but it's the 5 mil levy. That was a fabulous thing for us. Not so fabulous for you and this crew, but it was a wonderful thing. I think it was from the perspective that we knew that the facilities were in a position that we needed to spend a lot of money renovating it. We didn't have a source to do it. I see Art sitting here. He was here at the founding of all of these buildings. And of course, we were here about 20 years later, looking at them and going, boy, these things need work. And so we needed a way to fix stuff, but at the same token, we needed a way to put into the facilities all of the things that were going on with IT, and basically the teaching environments were different. Rather than being in long rows and the little desks and all that stuff, people were working in the round, so to speak, and different ways of teaching, and also the use of IT in the classrooms, and we just weren't ready for that. And the 5 mil was a way we were able to do it. We went to the taxpayers at a time that we were riffing, which was kind of a bizarre thing. And they were going, what are you doing? And we said, well, we're trying to fix the place up. We're trying to get it back up to the standards that it needs to be for today's teaching environments and learning environments. And so I would say that was probably one thing I'm probably the most proud of. And what became accomplished was much more than I thought we were going to get accomplished when we first started out with it. We knew we were going to raise, at that point when we started, about $8.5 million. Ultimately, it raised close to $12.5 million. We were able to renovate about 60% of the campus. And that renovation meant also not just pipes and valves, but it also changed physically a number of the buildings. The art building, Eastern Fine Arts, and as I said earlier, sorry about those of you in Western Fine Arts. I know it's got issues. I believe it still is. But we've got a lot done, and so I think that was one. Albany County campus, I also think, was an innovative process that we had there as well. But the 5 mil was probably had the best impact.
What is your style in dealing with employee personality conflicts?
My style.
If you get in one of those he said, she said fights, if you will, how do you deal with
Let's
it?
all get together and we said. Well, past practices is I usually have everybody get together. Let's have a meeting. Let's discuss this. Let's find out what the problems are and get them out in the open and talk about them and find a way, a process to deal with it. And the process, depending upon what we agree to, go through some kind of a process to go through each one of the steps that we need to go through and come up with a plan of how we're going to work together and work through those types of things. I've been, really fortunate in most places, mostly here, But I've had a great staff, wonderful staff, people that are responsive, want to participate, want to make things work correctly, want to be a part of the team. They are a great team. They continue to be a great team. We have conflicts within the departments. People get upset over issues that come up, or you know, it just requires pulling people together and having a conversation about what the problems are and discuss how we can fix them.
LCCC, as all colleges do, have some academic programs with low enrollment and low graduation rates. What support would you, as the interim president, offer to encourage growth in these programs?
Low enrollment and low graduation rates. The graduation rates kind of an interesting discussion, because everybody says, well, you have low graduation rates and a lot of stuff. And, you know, frankly, you've got to look at why people come to school here. Or in Laramie, they're here to take a class or a couple classes. They're trying to fix or deal with a specific need that they have. And they're not here to graduate. They're here to take a class. They're here to gain knowledge, to learn about something specifically. So graduation rates is a little interesting topic. I think there needs to be clarity, not only, well, primarily to legislators, to the public, as to don't look so much at the graduation rate, look at the success rate. I'll use my sister as an example. There's a lot of people who actually like my sister, but she's been extremely successful in her life. But guess where she took classes originally? Right here. And the class she talks about is Western Civil, or it was a Western, it was an English class about Western literature, sorry, not civilization, but literature. And she thought it was going to be a different kind of Western. It turns out it was Zane Grey. But ultimately, she said it was a great class. She said it was something that I would never have thought of it being, number one. Number two, it was a great class. She remembers it vividly. She talks about it. And it also helped her finish her degree. Now, she completed a degree at the University of Texas, and she's got her JD in Texas, and she works for JP Morgan private bank, and she's been with them for some time. So she's been extremely successful in her life, and uses that as an example. And so obviously, very proud of her. We're all very proud of her successes, but LCCC was a component of it. I took classes here when I was in high school. I took, believe it or not, ethics. I think there are a lot of ethic issues that probably needs to raise up to the top of a lot of people's discussions. But I took that class, and then I, of all things, took an auto body class with John Stockdale years ago, thinking I could work on my pickup. Forget that. What I learned was I need to hire somebody to do it. So similarly, I have a number of other friends that have started here. They took a class here, and so answering the question of graduation rates, I think that is an issue. Low enrollment programs are another thing. When you talk about low enrollment programs, you need to go in and look at, well, are there job opportunities when people get out of them? Is there a demand for it? Is the curriculum right? Is it meeting a particular need? So there's a number of issues that you need to look at in a low enrollment program. Are we adequately providing the kinds of information that we need? Is there interest? Is there just generally interest? Are people really want to do that? So I think there's a variety of issues that need to be reviewed on the low enrollment programs.
One final question.
Oh.
It's a good one. What do you see as the role of a developmental education program here at LCCC, and do you envision any changes?
Developmental education, are we talking pre-K age, or what are we talking about here?
I think we're talking about courses that students need to get to develop their skills to enter college courses.
Just to enter college courses. What I call pre-Hathaway scholarship courses, as the case may be. And the question is what do we need to do to
how do you see that program's role on our campus, and do you envision any changes in the program?
Well, you hear a lot of political rhetoric about this. I mean, we're it. We're who ultimately has to do it to get the students ready, unless something happens with K through 12, to be sure that the students are ready. That probably requires some form of partnership on our part, and I'm sure this has been going on for years, but a discussion about having the students ready as they come out of K through 12. But beyond that, we have a responsibility to help these students get beyond that. And so I don't know that there would be significant changes. I guess I'd have to review it, be advised of what's happening. And I know we have a number of students that are in those programs to either get their students get their GED or to improve their math skills in particular, and some of the other areas. And so I think it's going to happen and continue to happen. I know a number of students that are my kids' age. I have 2 kids, both at the University of Wyoming, but they have a number of friends that are actually taking classes at LCCC in Laramie because they want to live in Laramie with their pals, and they're enrolled in LCCC so that they can be with their pals, but they're extremely happy with it, and many of them do need some of the remedial classes that are offered to get them up to speed, and some of them take a little while to get done, but it's just the nature of it, and it's an important role that we have.
That concludes the open forum. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Bob, I took the Western Lit class too. I wonder if your sister was in my class. All right, folks, I'm going to let you know what's coming up. We are taking a half-an-hour break. Bob is also going to be on a campus tour. He is going to have some